Only 7 seasons in the Premier League over the last 33 years and an average Premier League finishing position of 18th over their last 4 years in the division. An overall season average of 40% possession, the least amount of goals scored of any team in the top 12, and yet this team has conceded the second least of any club, remains the only team that has defeated the runaway league leaders across all competitions in the Premier League, and they have only that very same team to look up to in the league standings. The Nottingham Forest of today is a long shot from the all-conquering team of yesterday, but even still, they've managed to find a way to capture the attention and adoration of every eyeball on Premier League football. At the time of recording this video, this team has won 6 league games in a row. 4 of them have been away from home. There are a lot of questions on everyone's mind, but they all come down to the same one-word summation. How? A manager whose qualities are well known but has still suffered his fair share of ridicule, players whose qualities are well known but have still suffered their fair share of ridicule. There are a lot of narratives and storylines that we'll be seeing come out from this Forest side. We'll only really be covering a few of them in this video, but hopefully with those few we can get to the bottom of how this sleeping giant has suddenly awoken. Hello, hope you're doing well. I'm Tinashe. Welcome back. On today's agenda, a Forest and some wood. At the current moment in time, Forest sits joint second in the Premier League after 20 games played, 40 points in total, level with Arsenal. To put this into context, they already have more points than they managed in 5 of the 7 full Premier League seasons they have competed in to date. 3 of those seasons ended in relegation. They are defensively impressive, they have incredible width, they keep things simple, and they're just frustrating to play against. For example, with 35% possession against Leicester, they had double the shots, more corners, and won 3-1. By looking at the stats alone, some may call it anti-football, but it's not that at all. Not really. You already know the deal by now when it comes to stories like this that have this kind of fairy tale element to them. Not everyone knows the finer details of why this is so significant, so if you don't, that's what we're about to get into, and if you do, then this video is timestamped. Do what you need to do. Founded in 1865, Forest is one of the oldest football clubs to ever be established that is still operating to this very day. They're unique in a lot of ways, and I'm going to be spitting a lot of facts at you right now, so be ready. The Forest in their name, naturally, is derived from the area where their early matches were played, the Sherwood Forest. Legend has it, this is where the legend of Robin Hood began. Steal from the rich, give to the poor. There's a joke in there about taking points off all the big clubs, but I'm one, too lazy and not creative enough to make it, so sorry about that. Having been established so early, the influence of this club is palpable. They donated kits and equipment to Liverpool, Everton, and Arsenal before any of them had been fully established. Arsenal wear a red kit because some ex-Forest players donated a couple of shirts to them when they were still starting out in 1886. However, even though Forest were established well before most clubs and even helped raise them up, they were not one of the 12 founding members of the Football League. Only 1 team per town was permitted to join. Nottingham's spot went to Notts County. They were the older team by a couple of years and occupied the bigger stadium. Some believe the potential gate receipts from the latter reason was the main driving force to this decision. Nonetheless, they joined the Football League 4 years after it was established in 1892. Here's some more little factoids for you. Taken straight from their website, they were the first English side to wear shin pads, and also part of the first match where a referee used a whistle. I guess safety and enforcing the rules has always been a priority over there. An FA Cup was won in 1898, but half a century of relegations and promotions would follow. Another FA Cup came in 1959, but the story more or less remained the same. More fun facts, because I'm full of those today, you're welcome. The scorer of the opening goal for Forest against Luton in their 2-1 FA Cup win in 1959, Royston Dwight, cousin of Reginald Dwight, which is the birth name of one Sir Elton John. And Dwight's goal in that game, it was a real rocket, man. I mean, it was actually alright. It was like a cutback. It was a little bit sweaty, if we're all being completely honest. Things seemed to take a turn in '66 when a Forest side challenged for the title and only narrowly missed out to Manchester United in the table. The football was so good and hope was so high, they were essentially guaranteed a crowd of 40,000 people or more per game. This actually turned out to be a bit of a red herring because they were relegated 6 years later in 1972. Something needed to be done, but luckily for them, it looks like they found the right man to do it. Brian Clough was a fascinating man, and by the sounds of things, a pretty disagreeable one. He was the type to not shy on letting his mind be known if he didn't approve of an opinion, as evidenced by the fact that he fell out with many in the industry, even some of his best friends. He would badmouth colleagues, bosses, players, the entire FA live on air if things were in a particularly bad moment. I can't stress enough that this man was never afraid to let his opinions be known, and he was actually quite famous for that too.
Brian Clough, some soccer player or something. Anyway, I heard that this fella talks too much. Whoever you are, I'm the talker. Now, Clough, I've had enough. Stop it.
But I must say, the man was witty. He was funny. He knew how to orate. He knew how to get the best out of people. What else do you want? Football is an entertainment business. No matter what people think, it's also about results. And here you have someone embodying everything good about the spectacle.
I'm a Football League manager by trade. That's my trade, all right? I do it well. I do it good. It could be argued I'm the best in the business.
He did this as a player, particularly with Middlesbrough, where he scored over 200 goals in 222 appearances in the second division, yet reportedly handed in transfer requests every other week for varying reasons. One of the main reasons was the leaky defense. They conceded as many as they scored. So much so that he once asked his defense how many goals he'd have to score for his team to win a match. To be fair, he believed that there was something more nefarious going on, that his defense was taking bribes. Though not definitively proven, many believe he was correct. But apart from situations like that, unwavering is one way to put him, unpleasant as how many others saw it. But he was undeniably brilliant. Oftentimes, the best of the best do have, a good and a bad side to them. After retiring from playing at 29 due to a bad knee injury, he went into management and never changed at all. The big achievement started at Derby after signing in 1967. They had been wallowing in the second and third division since 1953, unable to find a way out. Within 2 years, he took them to the first division. Within 5 years, he won the first division title, and he got there by releasing and replacing 11 out of the 15 players he inherited and firing tea ladies and receptionists for not buying into the cause.
Philosophy I've got is the fact that if there are 100 battles to be won when you take over a new job, you might as well get them all done in the first 3 months if you can.
After being defeated in the European Cup semi-finals versus Juventus the following year, he vehemently believed the ref had taken bribes to favor Juventus. It did come out later that the ref had accepted gifts from the club, which is of course not allowed. His post-match interview with the Italian reporters: "No cheating bastards do I talk to. I will not talk to any cheating bastards." He then brought into question how courageous Italy was in World War II. All of this is to say that this man was quite the character. Years later, after falling out at Derby and bouncing around, he joined Nottingham Forest in January of 1975, a team in turmoil in the second division. They would go on to finish 16th. What happened thereafter is something that, quite frankly, will never happen ever again, and it's astounding that it happened in the first place. Forest's finishing positions in consecutive order under Clough were 16th, 8th, 3rd. Promotion to the first division secured. His first year up, champions with a 7-point gap. And this was back when a win only counted for 2 points. Also, winners of the League Cup. Now, this has happened a couple times in English football where a team that's just been recently promoted becomes champions. Spurs did it in 51, Ipswich did it in 62, but this was kind of on a whole other level. Liverpool were in their heyday and winning a European Cup or league title or both every other year. Everton were ramping up to their strongest period ever, and this team that hasn't even been in the division for decades comes and one-ups everyone immediately. But it wasn't just them. Forest's first ever year in European competition resulted in them being champions. It was done by beating Liverpool, the holders, in the first round. Their second year, champions again. Somewhere in there was a 42-game unbeaten streak too. By today's standards, this incredible team isn't too hard to understand. Clough kept things simple. Pass and move, counter-attacking playstyle, keeping the ball on the ground, focusing on your position. The only difference was that he knew how to get the best out of every single unit in his team, some of whom had long been considered rejects and lower division fodder. It doesn't make sense. It truly doesn't. But this is why I wanted to take some time to describe Brian Clough in this video. Obviously, not enough time because the man was quite a character, but this is a video on Forest and we have to stay on topic. He had an eye for talent, an ability to incite loyalty, and a footballing mind that was unrivaled. All his haters were having the worst times of their lives. Several names have been engraved in history because of this Forest side. Too many to name in one video alone. John McGovern, the captain and a man who was with Clough at Derby. John O'Hare, also a player that he managed before. Tony Woodcock, Viv Anderson, Martin O'Neill, Peter Shilton, winner of the PFA Players Player of the Year award as a goalkeeper, no easy feat. Kenny Burns, Football Writers Association Player of the Year in the same year. That was the golden era of Forest, and I wanted to just go over some of those minor details so we're all on the same page, because from then on, the only direction that things went was down. Many of the best players in the squad went on to leave and the replacements were just not good enough. This was significant. Clough stayed on for 11 more years, while his right-hand man, Peter Taylor, who had been with him through every success he had had as a manager by that point, retired. This was significant. Taylor is just as responsible as Clough for the success of Derby County and Nottingham Forest, but I feel history has somewhat forgotten him in the wake of the larger-than-life personality Brian Clough was. He was the true eye for talent and is even credited with converting Kenny Burns from a striker to a defender the year before he was awarded Player of the Year. Sadly, here, what may seem like the sort of thing that can be chalked up to just time running its course can actually be attributed to a massive falling out that had been building up for years. Taylor came out of retirement months after leaving Forest to manage Derby, and even took John Robertson, a star Forest player, with him. For that reason, potentially, probably for other reasons, Clough called Taylor a snake in the grass. If his car broke down and I saw him thumbing a lift, I wouldn't pick him up, I'd run him over. Hectic. Taylor responded. That's the sort of thing I've come to expect from a person I now regard with great distaste. Wow. It seems a lot of niggling things over the years led to a war of words, and the two never truly reconciling till each took their last breath. In the wake of Taylor's death, Clough dedicated his autobiography in his honor, clearly struggling with the fact that he never got to reconcile with someone he once considered so close. Genuinely, it's quite sad. As for Forest, by 1992-93, the inaugural year of the Premier League, they were truly cooked. Rock bottom of the table, relegated. Clough shown the door. Roy Keane, their highest rated young player at the time by miles, was desperately plotting an escape route. Manchester United gave him a home. Forest came back up and even finished third in the league, but thereafter, they were doomed to linger in the lower rungs indefinitely. There is a lot of detail in between, but just so we can keep things in the here and now, we're going to time skip about 3 decades to 2022. After finishing 4th in the championship, they won the playoffs and returned to the top division. Forest had made a lot of improvements, but since the 80s had been relegated to a lower level side. The type of team that for the longest time could only dream about making it to the top division, and if they got there by some crazy miraculous chance, would have to fight tooth and nail to stay up. And honestly, if you remove everything that's happened over the past couple of months, they are still that. 2022-23, promoted to the league, spent a ton of money on players because you must to compete. 16th place. Second year, 17th place. 4 and 6 points off the drop each time. Of course, I want to preface this by saying that the Premier League offers the highest level of football on the planet, okay? Just by default, if you are in the league, you are one of the best teams in the world. But I just want you to suspend your overall outlook right now and only look at things relative, right? How teams perform relative to one another. Because if we do that, then Forest are better than all of them, except maybe Liverpool, who they've beaten. We come full circle to the present day. So what's the biggest change that we're seeing right now? Well, it's Nuno Espirito Santo's first full season in charge. He took over halfway through last year as Steve Cooper had the club in a very precarious position. Steve Cooper, of course, is the person that brought Forest to the Premier League in the first place, and he should be celebrated as that, which I think that he is. But evidently, he had taken them as far as he could. Forest was barely hanging on. The defense was leaking, everything was a little bit unorganized. It was a problem. Nuno Espirito Santo's half-season had one objective in mind: plug the holes and prevent a capsize. He told Sky Sports in late 2024 he mostly used that time to improve Forest's defending of set pieces. He got the job done. Not entirely surprising given that he took Wolves from the Championship to the Premier League after an extended absence and maintained top 7 finishes back to back after coming up. But there are some people out there that even to this day don't necessarily believe in him too much. Those are these same people that saw him go to Tottenham Hotspur, have a dreadful time, only last 6 months, and then head off to Saudi Arabia. He did win the Saudi League in his first season there, but I'm not entirely sure that many of the Premier League watching crowd are gonna assign too much praise to that achievement. What he's done since has piqued that crowd's attention though. When Nuno was at Wolves, they were the team that nobody wanted to face. They're still a bogey team today, but not like they used to be. They would set traps all over the pitch, allowing teams to think that they're progressing, sucking teams into areas that they can control, opening up space between the defenders, and then counter-attacking at pace. This is how Premier League watchers were introduced to guys like Diogo Jota, Raul Jimenez, Pedro Neto, and Joao Moutinho. This playstyle essentially invites tons of pressure, so the concentration levels and awareness of the space around them is something that really needs to be drilled in. There are some similarities between this current Forest side and that Wolves side of 2 or 3 years ago, but there are also likely just as many differences. This guy is an experienced manager. He noticed the things that are bad and the things that are good. He's doubled down on those things that are good and maybe gotten rid of the bad things. For example, that Wolves side defended right up to their box, employing more of a low block. This Forest side, however, tends to take action as soon as the ball reaches the final third, employing more of a mid-block. The main reason being that they're trying to limit the high-quality chances that they face, and it's definitely working. The only team in the Premier League right now that's conceded less is Arsenal. They've only conceded 1 less. Like it was at Wolves, the majority of the attacks that Forest have come through the wide areas, and they have some real experts on their hands in Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi, ex-Man United and ex-Chelsea. Both of them arrived at Forest under mixed opinions from each club. Hudson-Odoi was overhyped. He's someone that needed a reset and needed one badly. I remember watching him at Chelsea and seeing him refuse to run after he'd been given silly money. He went on loan to Bayer Leverkusen and that didn't seem to work out at all. Elanga was deemed not good enough for United. Realistically, he had just turned 21 by the time that he left Man United. He was rushed into a sinking ship and expected to perform, so what do you expect? But you can see, there is a proper player in there. And honestly, he probably wouldn't have improved at all if he was still at United, so why am I still talking? Together, they've contributed about 6 goals and 5 assists in the league, which doesn't sound like that much, but their game is about so much more than just goal contributions. Also, Hudson-Odoi is credited with curling in the effort that took them past Liverpool. Along with Morgan Gibbs-White, the true focal point of this team, their job is to break at pace and carry the ball up the field. Forest's 3rd goal against Wolves recently shows us just that. They're soaking up pressure as Wolves commit more and more late in the game. The ball is cleared and Hudson-Odoi is on the ball with lightning pace. Holds on to it while everyone catches up, gets it off to Ward-Prowse, and Awoniyi finishes. Earlier in that same match, both wide men got assists purely by staying wide and cutting the ball back. Guys like Chris Wood absolutely love these two and eat up any opportunity they serve up for breakfast. He currently has 12 this season and counting. All of them came from pretty much the same way: being in the right place at the right time. Like I said, Gibbs-White is the focal point here. Very light on his feet too. In the center, all good things happen through him. 4 goals and 3 assists so far, again, sounds low, but remember that Forest aren't a very high scoring team. They've only scored 29 goals. 7 goal contributions adds up to about 25% of their output. The midfield of Ryan Yates, Nicholas Dominguez, or Elliot Anderson, they operate so close to their defense that teams can't really play between the lines for them, and as a result, you'll see teams take a lot of speculative long shots against Forest because they can't really cultivate these high quality chances. Their actual defensive line is so solid that even when they lose structure and look ripe to concede, guys like Murillo will get themselves into these areas and act as the last barrier. And there are many more examples like this, goal-saving clearances and whatnot from this team this year. Ola Aina, Murillo, Nikola Milenkovic, and Nico Williams have all been fantastic as shot stoppers, and Mats Sells, who only arrived a year ago and reportedly was the 6th choice of goalkeeper that Forest had shortlisted when they were looking for a man, is now one of the best keepers in the league. He pulls out a wonder save in every game I've seen of Forest. I made a note earlier on about how this is not anti-football that this team is playing, where some people might view it as being that. And the reason is that the thesis for anti-football is negativity first, right? Prevent the opposition from scoring as much as possible, boot the ball out far and wide, and then just live on scraps. That's not what this team is doing. Their movements are calculated. They do set out to prevent the opposition from scoring like everyone else does, but they're also a lethal attacking force. They regularly outshoot the opponents, or at the very least match their shooting output. They outsmart them by luring them into positions where they have little chance of succeeding. They do ride their luck a little bit, which is something that does need to be addressed. Wolves could have come out with a better result against them if their finishing was a bit better. In their victory against Liverpool, the same can be said. Same thing against Everton. But name me one team right now that hasn't achieved something significant without riding their luck just a little bit. You can't. On that note, it's time for a reality check with the notion of riding luck. I make this point every time I make a video about a team that seems to be overperforming in the league deep into the season, because it applies to all of them, whether it's Brighton, Wolves, Brentford, Villa, Newcastle, and beyond. It is what it is. There is still a pretty big gap between those teams and the teams that perpetually tend to stay in the league. It might sound disrespectful, but it's fact. Take a look right here. This is a table showing the latest year that every team in the Premier League entered the league, apart from the Big Six, which includes Everton, and whom I've just decided to deduct 10 points from. And then of course we have Man City, and I don't think I need to discuss their deal. Every other team, they can face the drop. None of them have been in the league for more than 13 years. Bear in mind that because of the TV money skyrocketing in the league over the last 20 years or so, many of these teams have been able to compete on a much better playing field. Not a level playing field, but it's more like a diagonal field right now. It used to be a completely vertical one where only about 4 teams were here. And then when you have entire Gulf nations owning football teams, you can only imagine that the historical status quo is going to be shaken up just a little bit. But in my eyes, it still remains there. Forest themselves are a testament, as we spoke about earlier. In the first year they were up, they actually outspent most teams in the league. And bear in mind, they hadn't even been in the league for almost 3 decades. But this can only last while things are going well, and things can very quickly not go well. You're only one bad game away, or a couple bad games away, from going down and never seeing the light of day again. Look at me talking about the championship as if it's like some sort of dungeon. It's not that, but remember, I'm talking relative here. We're talking 100 million Premier League versus not 100 million, but still a lot. And bear in mind that one of the most recent promoted sides this season were champions of England less than a decade ago. The point is that you need to enjoy the moment and not get too complacent. If you're watching this during your lunch break, I'm talking to you specifically. Having said all of that, Forest fans, fear not. Nuno seems to have his head screwed on right. He says he doesn't even look at the table. Maybe the end of the season, I'll probably take a look. At the end of the season, I promise you guys I will have a look. I've been around too many years to know that honeymoons do not last forever, you know? The problem is to sustain it. It is very difficult. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about Forest, about this video, about all that good stuff. What do you guys want to see next? That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.